Blessed be to your day. May it be everything you require to create everything that you desire. Remember, healing is destructive. It's going to take a level of honesty that's going to force you into that super state of accountability. And you are deserving, but you're not entitled. It was very cold. It was about 55 degrees when I got up and I went out for my run. Dropped the video. You can see the video. It's in my story. But I was thinking about shallow graves and unconsecrated grounds during this season. Concentration of your energy based on whether you are in the state of transition or the state of transmitting. It made me think about your garden. Are you in the garden or are you in the graveyard? These are important because though they're both grounds, different works for different roots. That means there's different ways to go towards things, different processes. There's different processes based on where you're at. Are you in your graveyard, subconscious mind, or are you in your garden, or are you in your heart? The graveyard is the subconscious mind, the unresolved, the shallow graves, the unresolved. A lot of times for myself, I found myself bringing up things or burying things, because as we keep burying and repressing, I had to realize that I was just burying things on top of things. Like I would just one issue on top of another issue and bury it. But that would only be a shallow grave, the unconsecrated grounds. If you're familiar with anything in the aspects of consecrated grounds, it goes back to the earth. You bring it back to the earth. You bring it back to its space. You released it of what is the humanity. You released it from the body of what it was, and you're embracing the energy of what it is. So, use an example. When I talk about my grandmother, my grandmother was, I've told the story, my grandmother was a bruja. She was a conjure woman. She did that work. She was putting in that work. All hidden behind the aspects of the church, being in the south of the church. She was a very great woman. But she did have a temper. She did have a lot of things that she did not yet assess with herself. And when she transitioned, and what we see a lot of times during the transition, usually people bring up the good parts. We bring up the celebrating the life in the aspects of missing it. But we don't really look at the attitude. We don't look at the things that they were going through. We don't bring those to the surface. And that's due to, if we bring up those aspects in our life for ourselves in that reflection of understanding how we are that person or how we became that person, it could be anybody. It can be a relative that you really weren't close to or really weren't cool with, or you had arguments with, or it could be your mom, your pops, whoever that is passed. And a lot of times, I've done this a lot of times in sessions where when I'm telling them, yo, have you forgiven this loved one or this person, relative that's passed? And usually they'll say, no, I never thought about it. They're coming. But then we get deeper into their sessions and they'll be like, well, my father came to me in a dream. My stepfather came to me in a dream. My mother, she passed away like 12 years ago. And she came to me in my dream. And I'm wondering why she's coming to me. And we weren't that cool when she was living. That's concentration. That's that level in your life, that faculty. Similar to whenever you have a dream about whatever it is. The reason that that dream is coming up is because you have not consecrated that thought. That thought has become unconsecrated. You have not dealt with that thought and what you have connected to that thought. So think about the aspects of guilt or abuse. Think about guilt, abuse, the regret, self-worth, whatever happened in that space of that thought. You have to consecrate those grounds, or else you're just going to be wandering through your graveyard, trying to plant things in a graveyard where you don't plant things in a graveyard. When you go to the graveyard, it's to release. It's to release it back to the earth. It's to release it back to the space. It's to release it from the bounds that you marked onto it based on your feelings and releasing it and understanding what it is. Until you do that, you leave this grave open. So now this grave, this thought process is still open. So now every time that you have an issue, every time you have an issue in your current state of existence, all you're basically doing is, whenever it doesn't serve you a purpose, the same way, that emotion, the same emotions that came up then coming up now, you just throw it into that grave. But what happens if the grave is, what if you did not know, what happens when a grave is not buried? What happens when a grave is not dug 6 feet? What happens when a grave is dug shallow if it's not dug down deep enough, or it's not packed in? When the rain comes, whatever's in that grave comes to the surface. That means whenever that season of clearing comes up, what comes to the surface? The body that you put in that shallow grave comes to the surface. An example of this is like the aspects that you get stuck in comparison. So now you're looking at every relationship that is now dead, and you've buried the emotions to it. You buried the thought process to that emotion, to that relationship, to that friendship, to whatever it is. You've buried it in that shallow grave. So now whenever the season comes up, the emotions come into change, the leaves start to change. Since we're in the fall, the harvest, you're burying in there. You're nurturing that, because the original roots, you haven't consecrated the grounds. You haven't taken ownership of that. One scene of that is in Originals, where you can't use the power until you consecrate it to the earth, till it's bound to that space. So a lot of times when you're inside of these spaces with yourself, your upsetness, your frustrations, your angers, whatever's coming up in your current cycle right now, especially since Mercury is going direct, that means everything that's come up since Mercury went into retrograde, everything that's came up is now going into direct. Now you're in your harvest. Now it's time to survey those crops. What have you been planting, and where have you been planting it? A lot of times we stay in these situations because we're planting based in the graveyard, because of that original situation, because of that issue with your family, because of that issue with the relationships, and you just keep, and now you're wondering why nothing's growing, because you're in the graveyard. You can use the graveyard once you consecrated that. Once you dealt with this emotion, once you dealt with that thought process, once you dealt with what has been unresolved, then you can now that ground is blessed. It becomes that hallowed earth. Now you can use that. Now you can use that dirt and bring it to your garden. Now you can start to transmute. But until you go through this transition process and you clear that space through that transition process, that means cleansing that space, hollowing that earth, consecrating those grounds. You're not going to grow anything. You're only going to get what I call, this is when we talk about zombies, ghouls, ghosts, haunting, spirits. All you're going to get is the spirit of that energy, whether it's that aspect of jealousy, insecurity, the spirit of regret, the spirit of doubt. That's the energy that's now inside of your space. So no matter what thought you have, no matter what you're trying to build, no matter what you're trying to put together, you can't go any further. You're wondering why you're at unrest. You're wondering why you're not you're wondering why you're not being able to rest, because your mind's not at rest. The graveyard, your grounds are not consecrated. So every time that you do put concentration on anything, nothing comes up. Nothing fruitful grows. And when something grows, it's the strangest fruit that you've ever seen. This goes into that aspect. We'll get into this week on the podcast. We're talking about that free initiative, that free incentive. See, a lot of times I looked at myself and was like, a lot of things that I left on the table to rot. A lot of things that I left in my past to rot, just to sit there. Okay, cool. I'm in a different position. I'm in a different state. I'm in a different relationship. I'm at a different job. Nothing from the old job. Nothing from the old space. None of that matters. But now I'm coming into the current space. And since I'm leaving these graves open, I've opened up these shallow graves. The moment that I get to a certain point in any space that I'm in, that's what comes up. This body comes out. This body comes floating down the river out of the grave. The skeleton comes out of the closet of something that I did not take care of. Now I have the choice. And based on that choice, I got the conditions that come with that choice. A lot of times when we're thinking about the conditions of our choices, you make a choice. We make that choice. And then from that choice has conditions. It's the acceptance of those conditions that come with that choice. Whatever choice you choose, whatever choice you choose, whichever direction you decide to take, does not matter. All that matters is, are you going to take the full accountability? Are you going to take full accountability for those actions? See, a lot of times when we're going into these spaces with ourselves based on the direction deeper into ourselves rather than just keeping on the same path, simple things like something as simple as long as you have somewhere to, I've talked about emotional dumping. As long as you have somewhere to dump it off at, 9 times out of 10, as long as you got a place to dump it off at, or you surveyed spaces to dump some stuff off at emotionally, 9 times out of 10, your change, what you're calling change, is simply reverted. So let's say, okay, cool. I have a reason not to, let's say I have a reason not to smoke. I have a reason not to do something. If that reason is not based on the consecration, or it's based on that shallow grave, or that unresolved that I have not dealt with, or the emotions, anything that comes up emotionally into that space, that stress, the moment that I'm stressed, the moment that I'm angry, the moment that the energy that is of that space, of that what I've buried, is present, I'm always going to revert back to whatever it is, because I'm not learning it. I had to understand this a long time. Like, there was things that I did not yet deal with, or when I said that I dealt with them, it was like I acknowledged it was there. Okay, it's there. Yeah, it's my fault. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, I did that. But I never apologized to myself for it. I never forgave myself for it. Because it made me feel that doubt. It made me feel some type of way. And since it made me feel some type of way, since I'm not dealing with it, trying to go forward, ignoring what's in my darkness, when I go forward, the first way that I used to deal with it magnifies. The way that I used to deal with issues magnifies. That becomes the compound interest put on that loan that you took out on whatever it was. That becomes that compound interest that becomes that loan or whatever it does. So now let's say in the aspect of let's use a relationship as an example. In that relationship, since you didn't deal with the first relationship, since I wasn't dealing with the first relationship with my mother, the issues with my mother, now in every relationship, whether friendship, love interest, job, whatever it was, didn't matter what type of relationship it was, any relationship was a partnership based on that 60, 40, 70, 30. So no matter what relationship it was, it didn't matter if it was one of my homeboys or it was a homegirl, girlfriend, whatever it was. Because I did not deal with the feminine aspect, which was in the aspect of my mother and the emotions that I felt, everything in my space reflected or triggered everything reflected or triggered or brought up this ghost or this spirit of this energy, this uncontrolled, this unevaluated emotion in a vengeful state to me, that it was seeking revenge from me in my mind. Because this is how it plays in your mind. So no matter where I was going, that would be the way that I would live that's the way I would live my shit out. So it didn't matter what happened inside of the space, whatever question that I asked, I already had an answer to. So since I already had an answer to it, it was written in my grimoire, I already had the answer written down in my mind that I would accept in the variations of this question that I would ask myself, that I was asking out loud. So now you think about every time that you're asking a bunch of questions, every question that you ask is the answer to the previous question. But if I have a preset answer in my mind, no matter what question that I ask, I'll ask a series of questions to pick apart every answer to formulate my answer to match the answer that's playing in my mind. Now, through this state, I have to use my energy. So if I go into a space that I'm frustrated in, that means I'm looking for answers to rationalize why I'm upset. So now my emotional ear is only listening to things to keep me to rationalize why I'm upset. There's no comprehension, let alone any communication. There's communication, there's talking, there's words coming out, but there's no comprehension because I'm not taking in accountability that as I'm listening to this conversation, what emotions are being triggered? Why am I going this way? Why am I going this way in this thought process? Why is this conversation playing out? Am I really listening to the conversation? I'm sitting in the graveyard. Basically, we're standing in the graveyard over a shallow grave about a situation or whatever it is, something that I've left uncovered in my own graveyard of unresolved, and that's where we're arguing from. So my energy's coming from there. So I'm dependent upon anything in my space, it has to match that energy. And as long as you stay in that situation with yourself, you need that. If once it's not dealt with, what do you do next? You create another shallow grave. That situation, you now put in another grave. It's dead at that moment in time. So, okay, cool. You put it off. And this is how we hide it behind. We hide it behind, you're fine, you're okay. You hide it behind, yeah, it was no issue. Okay, cool, whatever. You hide it behind. That's how you mark those headstones. The headstone is the whatever. The headstone is the I'm fine. The headstone is deal with it later. The headstone is the avoidance. The headstone is and then all of a sudden now, when you're going back into, now you're streaming through your graveyard, your subconscious mind, whatever addiction or whatever habit or whatever pattern that you use to deal with it. Remember, you've been doing the magic the entire time. Whichever libation method that you've chosen to deal with that energy, that's how you pull from that energy. That's why that's why you ever think about somebody whenever they're intoxicated, every time you sitting there, you thinking to yourself like, oh my God, I have all of these regrets and guilts. How not only have you how you've dealt with the regrets, how you've dealt with the doubts, it's going to be in correspondence to the energy. So a lot of times we don't even look inside of our space, and the people that are inside of our space in that environment, that are inside of that environment with us, friends, family members. I give you an example. I made a couple of posts today. I was live. I was hot. Let's go. Spirit said drop it. A lot of times that story, the story that's told from your point of view versus your sister, your brother, your mother, your uncle, auntie, the way that they tell the story versus you telling the story, that's where your guilt's at. The love or the way that you learned how to rationalize love in your space, the way that your brothers and sisters and your family have learned how to rationalize love of your mother, of your father, of your whoever, the person that raised you or did the traumatic event to you. That's where the root is. That's the unconsecrated grounds. You not going in there and understanding, oh my God, I've left this unburied for so long. Because now you got to think about it like this. The resentment that you feel, the resentment that you feel, the jealousy that you feel, the guilt that you feel, it's because you're trying to make them see it your way. You're always, every time I've had multiple consultations where it goes into that space. They were like, but my family don't want to talk about that story. I said, they're telling you exactly what you need to hear. My family don't want to talk about my father. My family don't want to talk about my mother. They don't want to talk about what happened during that day, during that cold summer day in 1990. They don't want to talk about it. They're giving you the answer that you need. Every time that you go into that space, you got to take away that entitlement. You think that you're entitled to an answer to fit your argument, to fit where you're at. You think that you're entitled to fit that argument. So now what you haven't forgiven, what you haven't learned, what you haven't accepted, you sitting in that space with yourself, wanting them to, the same way that you're wanting them to see the story your way, is the same way they want you to see the story their way. But it's never going to happen, because the same reason, here's the thing, the same reason that you exist to live out and exist in the days that you do, based on that story, is the same reason that they're doing it. The same way that they saw their father, their mother as the greatest thing ever in blocking out everything that bad has happened, is the reason that their relationships are the way that they are. It's the same way that you look at relationships, the way that you look at relationships. It's the y'all both are avoiding the same thing. That's why you get upset. And then that's why you go searching out. You got the grave open. You walking around in zombie land. You walking around like a zombie. Like the good zombies from the good zombies that are really, really fast. The functional zombies. You walking around like a functional zombie because you feel, because you're not dead. You're not dead. You're living. You're existing, and you living your life because you can go to work, because you can do whatever you're doing, and you're going to get, those are on your basics. As long as your basics are met, you don't really think about it. It's the moment that your basics are no longer being met, or the incentives are not being met, that's when you get upset. One or none of your incentives are not being made, are not being met. One of the incentives that you trained yourself into that space to accept anything inside of that space. That's why you upset. It ain't got nothing to do with them. It's your incentive that's not being met. Because that incentive, when it's not met, it shows your guilt. It shows your insecurity. It shows your lack of self-worth. It shows your lack of understanding of a situation with yourself. It shows where you haven't apologized to yourself. It shows where you are not willing to invest into the change. Because a lot of times we get stuck in this physical aspect. When people think about physical and mental, you think about money. When people think about physical and mental, you think automatically go to money. You think about money. But you got to think about energy in motion is currency. So anything that you create as a byproduct of your emotional intelligence, anything that you create is a currency. Trade, barter, trading and bartering. So now think about it like this. Your ability through your traumatic response to always be there for others through the aspects of your guilt. Everything that you have created based upon your guilt will be used inside of that space. Oh my God, okay, cool. You got the car. You got the crib. You got the spot that it can go to whenever they down and out and whatever it is. You got to remember how you created that space. What was the original reason of you creating your space? I've talked about this story before. Like my first ever apartment that I had for myself, it was basically built off of the issues that were going on at home with my mother, her husband, all these aspects. Those are the things that I was dealing with that I wasn't dealing with. So basically the emotions from that space is how I got my space, got my crib. And it seemed good. It seemed great because as long as I had them to blame, as long as I had them in that position of blame, I always could get something. Remember, you get based on what you give. You get based on what you give. Just because you haven't defined it yet, that's your why. That's your problem. You ain't willing to identify that. And then you'll realize when you lose it and why you lost it, but it's because of that reset. So now you're looking at your life like, oh my God, my life was so horrible because this happened and this happened. You still living in the aspect of, I've done the work. That work that you did back there, that's time served. Everything that you keep trying to bring up based on your unresolved traumatic issues, the problems that you had, all those aspects, all of that's time served. That's the reason that you're able to exist and even speak on it, because it's time served. You just haven't consecrated it yet. It's unconsecrated. You haven't owned it yet. So you have no access to that power past a certain point. The only way you getting access to it, is on the easy aspect. The only way you getting access to it is because you need something inside of your space that matches that energy. So while you sitting there crying, this is why you crying out, niggas ain't shit, bitches ain't shit. You need that in your space to keep getting some of that energy. Because if you sat there with that, if you sat there in that graveyard, if you sat there beside that grave and you allowed the rain to come up and hit you and you fall in the grave, I forgot the name of the movie. When the shorty, like, she fell in the grave and she almost drowned because it was a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. But like, you fall into the grave and now you drowning. You got to sit in that. See, a lot of times we sitting in these spaces and you're concentrating on wanting so many things in your life. You concentrating on wanting so many things to come up in your life. But are you doing it from a point of transition or are you doing it from the point of transmitting? See, if I'm transmitting things, I only can get based on what was already there. But if I'm sitting, But if I'm sitting there in a space and I'm looking at myself and I'm transmuting, that means I'm taking accountability of everything that comes up. I'm taking accountability of everything that comes up. Not from and remember, I've talked about going 3 in. I'm not looking to for fault and say you need to do this or I need to do this. I'm not looking at it like I'm not going to take all the blame. I'm looking at it from that point of I have my faults. I have accountability over my faults. I have to apologize to myself and assess this situation for myself. Because everything that I've not dealt with, that's what's being poured into this space. That's what I'm putting into my space. No matter what it is, no matter how far I go, my pattern based on that shadow will only give me so much light. So now I'm thinking about my emotions because what I was taught when I was younger, the aspect of the thought process of being grown. Now I'm stuck in this I'm grown aspect because that's what I heard over and over and over when I was younger. Since that's an unresolved aspect of however the formula of I'm grown came into the picture, of however it was said to you. When you get old enough, you can do this. When you do this, whenever with this. So the moment that some grown shit happened to you, the traumatic experience in this case, the moment that grown event happened to you, you thought you were grown. It stifled your emotions. Your emotional development is stuck at that gravesite. Your worth is stuck at that gravesite, sitting in that, you got that headstone. So basically everything that you're doing in your current state, because you're not consecrating, everything's unconsecrated. You got a bunch of shallow graves with your spirits running around. Everything you're doing into this space, all you serve as is a grave or a headstone. All you serve as is a grave or a headstone. You're saying just because you can create it here, okay, cool, you can create whatever you want here. All you are is a tomb. You are a tomb dead to rights, because everything you bring into this space is based upon that regret. Everything you bring into this space is based on that guilt. Okay, cool. You going in there, you knocking them down. Bruh, your dick is a headstone. Your dick becomes a headstone. Sis, bruh, queen, goddess, until you deal with that unresolved, your pussy is nothing but a fucking grave. It's a grave of your mistakes. Because think about how you use it. Think about when you use it. You stressed out. You want, okay, cool. All it is a grave for all of your mistakes. I thought about it. I posted a post, I think last week, when I was thinking, because I'm gonna, this Friday we're gonna talk about this the toxic femininity, toxic masculinity. I call it the G.O.D effect. But you got to think about it like this. If every time that you having sex, you out here with, I got motherfuckers going crazy. I got people going crazy and shit. I got niggas wanting to bust out my windows. I got shorty wanting to bust out my windows. If that's what you consider you being in a sense of being good, remember it matches your good woman argument. Remember that matches you a good nigga argument. Everything that you say after I'm a good nigga enhances what you haven't resolved. Why? You concentrating on being a good person and you ain't looking at the process of what it takes. You're not paying attention to the process of becoming good. There's a difference. There's a difference. I remember saying, yeah, I'm a good guy. And then everything that I'm doing is basically on physical and material while I'm a good guy. So now the only way I can keep the good guy thing going on based on the physical and material is by everything that I do is based on some type of incentive. So now I have to have an incentive to why I do the things that I do. So now every space that if I go into the same way you go into your job and you expect your paycheck on time and you expect to get paid for your hours and you expect to get free food and all of these nice little glittery glamours in your life is the same way you treat every aspect of the space. Because you can't experience anything. You can't expand and experience. You can't expand and experience because you still living with the old spirit in you still got that skeleton in your closet. You still got those old spirits dealing with running around. You still got that spirit of jealousy, that thought form of jealousy running around. You still got that thought form of that insecurity or that spirit of insecurity running around. You still got one of your demons that you remember, demon, Damien, magic, intelligence. So you got a level of intelligence that you have not tapped into running around, running your space, putting up drapes, putting up drapes, putting up curtains, decorating the whole house, decorating your whole spot. And then you wondering why when you go burn some fucking sage or you go light some fucking candles, and you wondering why you getting sick. You wondering why you choking up when you inside of your space. Because you are not consecrating that energy. You're not consecrating that energy. You are in a state of avoidance. See, when I break down this aspect of the spiritual, the magic itself, and the words being spells and all of that good shit, that's nice. But as long as you keep it up here and you ain't bringing it down here, and you ain't defining what it is down here, magic is emotion. Energy and motion is the magic. The words that you've already spoken are what are being pulled into that space when you invoke some shit. That's why you keep invoking shit, then you keep getting mad. You keep talking about you want peace in your life, but every time the chaos ensues, because you don't get peace, so every time the chaos ensues, or everybody hits your phone that's making you impatient, making you irritated, you ain't understanding that, that's the grave. I gotta go consecrate that because that's what I thought was peace. What once made me peaceful, what once made me feel peaceful was based on my guilt, was based on my insecurity, was based on my doubt. So remember, we talked about these degrees of consistency. You are always in a state of consistency. You are always in a state of balance, always. You just have to discern and learn, am I based on the distractions, i.e. comfort, i.e. control? That means as long as I'm distracted because I can react, I'm inside of my comfort zone. Or am I accepting these disruptions to help me learn the aspects of my discipline to come into my authentic authority with my energy inside of my space? Which degree of consistency are you in? In order, you can get to the higher, but you got to understand this. You got to understand where you were distracted at. Every time you trying to level up, and this is the discipline up here. That's every distraction. Two sides of the same coin. That's every distraction that's happened to you down here is not going to be the disruption to teach you discipline. So now you can't use the same excuse. I mean, I posted a video the other day where the dude was talking about 1 week without her, 2 weeks without her, 6 months without her, a year without her. And I'm looking at it, I was like, unfortunately, and when I made the caption over it, I said, unfortunately, he was and he still is the liability. She was an asset of control. He had a lack of discipline. He was distracted based upon the comfort based on that physical and the material. So everything that comes into his space based on the physical or the material, it had an incentive. Every incentive was every urge, everything that he had not yet dealt with to discipline. So a lot of times when we're looking into these situations and you want to go blame everybody else, and you want to go blame them for this, and that, what happens when they accept it? See, the difference when the motherfucker accepted, like, yeah, I know I did this. Yeah, I know I did that. And I accepted it. It was because of this, and this, and they're direct with you. How are you going to react then? Now you ain't got nothing to play on. Because they gave you everything that you needed, not what you want. They gave you exactly what you needed. They gave you what you needed to hear. But since you stuck in that old argument in your own head, it needs to match your argument and not it doesn't. You need another problem to go with your problem. Remember, all positive batteries don't work. All negative battery doesn't work. Don't work. You can't use an all negative battery. You can't use an all positive battery. It doesn't help. It won't hold the charge. So every time you go into that space, because you have something unresolved on the table, that's what that connects to. I talked about it yesterday with that strength and weakness. That's what keeps connecting to it. You keep connecting. It got to match this. It got to match this. But what about this? But what about this? But what about this? Half of the arguments that you got going on in your mind ain't got nothing to do with what's going on in the current situation. That argument you got going on in your mind, or that unresolved, it will never match up with the situation. What you have to do is, because that's fragmented, you got to fragment the conversation. You got to fragment the argument. You got to fragment everything that's inside of your space. You got to keep it compartmentalized, as within, as without. You got to keep everything compartmentalized in your life to match in here. So now everything that you do is based on that. So now your energy that's in motion is now based in that thought process. Now everything that you're doing is in that process of thought. It got to be this to this to this. The moment that you're dependent upon the functions, you're not understanding the sequence. See, once you understand that sequence, okay, cool. I'm at the graveyard. Cool. Let me go pour my libations. Let me go pour my Let me go pour my libations at the graveyard. Let me go pay honor and pay homage to my ancestors. All right, cool. That is the subject. Now it's time to assess the object. If any of my ancestors, any of my spirits, any of my unresolved thoughts come to the surface in some shape or form, that is the object that I must deal with. So if I'm asking my grandmother for some answers, because she represents the feminine inside of my space that I'm working with now. Is it in the divine feminine presence? Yes, because it's unlocked. But when it comes down to the human space, everything that has not been dealt with, that means the regret, the guilt, that's what's being magnified inside of my space. That's what I have to deal with in order to use that energy to create the place. See, a lot of us get stuck within the object. You stuck in the object, and you won't move this object. You won't put the concentration on that object without an incentive. I'm only going to do this if I get this place, if I can set up this place. See, you worried about that result. As long as you're looking at the result, and as long as you're looking at the subject, and you never paying attention to the object is the presence of your now. That's where all of the energy is held. All these two things are byproducts of this in this center. These are the byproducts on that scale. So if I'm concentrating on the result, or if I'm concentrating on doing, even starting the work, or what it would involve, then I'm never paying attention to the object that's in front of me. Where I'm not willing to go, I will create a conduit or a body to formulate, or a golem to formulate, to use into that space. So now relationship, it's a body. Relationship, job, it's a body. Through this body, I can get this result that I want. But I'm not going to get what I need because it's only at half. Remember, I've talked about that 70-30, 60-40, 70-10-10-10. You only going to get based on what you put into this emotional body. If I'm not assessing the emotions I'm putting into this, I'm damn sure not going to pay attention to what comes out of it. So then I'm just going to repeat the process. Oh, it didn't work. Dig another grave. Don't dig it too deep. Don't dig it too deep. You might need it later on. Don't dig the grave too deep. Leave it put a headstone on it. What's the headstone? Your last insecurity, your last failed relationship, the last failed relationship, the last failed friendship, the last failed job, whatever regret and doubt you got. Now you got a whole plot sitting in your cemetery, sitting there waiting. So now every time that you want to bring up something in comparison, let me go back to this dead body over here. What did I create with that dead body? Just because you created it inside of that space. I was a good woman then. I was a good nigga then. Okay, now you in this current space, new object. Now the newest object that comes into your space has going to be maximized. It's going to magnify the strength to trigger you. Yeah. Basically all you do, what we end up doing with our energy is hitting that with that Renner Center. Remember, I talked about that with understanding your emotional credit score, your emotional intelligence. You doing Renner Center with your energy. So now you don't understand the compound interest on your energy that's magnifying in it. Therefore, okay, cool. Think about it like this. If I go somewhere and they say my credit's not good enough to get to a certain point to get something, I have two choices. Either I can go assess my credit, what's on my credit report, and start doing the work, or I can go try to find a loophole. A lot of us like to go try to find a loophole because you're thinking about time. Time is emotion. The behavior cements that emotion into that time and creates that pattern. So now you're stuck in that loop. So now everything that you're doing comes at a higher interest rate. Because if someone's not doing a credit check or not doing an assessment, that's a reflection of you not doing an assessment. You got to accept whatever they bring into the space. A lot of y'all keep getting stuck because y'all keep bringing up same stuff in the same space. And wondering why you keep getting the same thing after about 6 months. Why you couldn't keep the bill? Why the bill could? Because the way that you acquired it. You got to keep that going. You got that shit in desperation. That shit made you happy. Guess what? You got to go back to a point of desperation before you can use any more of that energy. You see how that rental agreement works? And every time you go back into that state, of depression, that shit's magnified. Every time you go back into that state of frustration, that shit's magnified. Every time you go back into that state of that doubt, that insecurity, that wound, that regret, that guilt, it's magnified. And that's your interest rate. So you went from, why they got a 6.9 interest rate, why they got a 0, because they got a 750 credit score. Their emotional intelligence is off the chain. They're assessing their credit. Even when you started, and here's the other part. When you start assessing your credit score, this is when you start doing your internal work, you start assessing your credit score. Yeah, you gonna get shit in the mailbox. You gonna get the credit card. You gonna get the credit card in the mail that says, ooh, you pre-approved. You gonna get the loan that says you're pre-approved. You gonna get some good shit in the mail, in the box. And you gonna look at it and be like, ooh, I must be doing good. And you gonna apply for it. And then you gonna get it. But then you're gonna be like, okay, there's some restrictions that you gotta pay and you gotta do this, this, and this. All right, cool, is this good? Because it's gonna help me. You totally forget about the work that you needed to do. You totally forgot about the work that you needed to do. Because what's coming into your space, think about it like this. There's a difference between me getting a credit card. There's a difference between me getting a credit card and knowing how to use it, or how to apply to it, rather than getting to a credit card and doing the same thing that I've been doing. There's a difference between me getting a credit card now in that aspect and knowing exactly how to maximize it, rather than me with the same mindset of having a credit card on play. I got a credit card on standby, and now I got this credit card and I use it the same exact way. Credit card, i.e. relationship. Credit card, i.e. the job. Credit card, i.e. the new whatever it is. Credit card, i.e. oh my God, the credit card, whatever the credit card may be, and learning how to use that energy and learn how to, because there's a difference balance. If you use your whole credit card and you already have the money, if I don't have the money, if I don't have the energy in the account, I'm not going to use the credit card. Why do you think they say you need to have collateral and credit on debt on deck before you even do any work? You got to have it on deck. Remember, here's the Harlem logic. Here's that Harlem double up logic I tell y'all about. I ain't got 100 till I got 200. So if I got a credit card, they got a $10,000 limit on it. There ain't $10,000 on that card. It's only $9,000. No, there ain't $10,000 on that card. It's only $5,000. So that means, let me assess my energy. Do I have $5,000 do I have $5,000? Because in my account, I don't have $5,000. If I don't have $10,000, I ain't got $5,000. Therefore, I only got $2,500. So I only got $2,500 to put towards this credit card. I only got $2,500 to use on this credit card with the interest rate. That means with the interest rate, whatever the interest rate on that credit card or that money I'm about to use, that means that's going to be added into that fee. So I really only can spend about $1,500, maybe $1,000. I'll say I have $1,000 to spend, because they're going to tax me through that $500. So now if I use this credit card, I'm only going to spend $1,000. They're going to hit me back. I'm going to pay back the interest in full, and then they'll increase my balance. Everything down here is based on credit. Cash is king, but credit is queen. Credit is the feminine aspect. That's why you fight so hard for credit, because it's the feminine aspect. That's why you fight so hard for credibility and recognition, because credit is the feminine aspect. Cash is the masculine aspect. This is how you start understanding your energy every time you burn. Now let's talk about the ancestral money. When you burn ancestral money, you're burning it based on credit. You're sending it back into the feminine. You're destroying its physical body or what it was built in. But if I'm not, let's go all the way back. You ain't consecrating the grounds. Where the hell is that energy going? Into that emotion. Into that state of that emotion. It's going into the state of that emotion. So now you're wondering why everybody around you everything that's around you in your environment that you built based off of guilt, you based off of doubt, you based off rejection, you based off some aspect of aptitude of mindset. You're wondering why they're coming up and you're not. You're wondering why they're able to succeed in the most mundane level, and you've been doing all of this work. Because you have not consecrated your ground. You have not consecrated your energy. So it doesn't matter what anybody does inside of that space. You're going to see everybody flourishing but you inside of that space. It fits your argument. It fits your argument of being used. It fits your argument of not trusting motherfuckers. It fits your argument. So now you stuck in since you're stuck within comparison, you stuck within the competition, therefore you stuck within the distractions of control. You see how you ran the whole thing back, looking for an incentive. But at that same time, on the other end of that coin was every opportunity to learn. See, you looking at the person and what they doing and what they look like and how they dress and what they doing, and you're saying, oh, they're no better than me because they don't look like this, and this. Because you got stuck on that predisposition that physical fucking mattered. You got stuck on that predisposition that material actually fucking mattered. So now you stuck. Oh my God. Why are they succeeding? Why are they advancing and I'm not? Because you're still looking for an incentive to make the move forward. See, this is chess, not checkers. One of the biggest moves about when you play chess or when you play chess especially, when you play chess, whenever you put your hand on the piece, you must move that piece. See, this is you getting stuck in the physical aspect. You keep putting your hand on the piece without any thought. That piece represents the thought or the move or the motion. That piece represents the emotions behind your thought. So you must move this piece. But if you have not formulated the thought to match the move of that piece, and you touching the rooks all the time, or you touching the pawns, then every move you make is based on being a pawn. But since you so stuck on trying to be the king or the queen, and you don't understand that you a pawn already, you still a pawn you still a pawn based on your traumatic experience, the shit you ain't dealt with, now you gotta move that piece. Because you ain't, man, my life is not where I was supposed to be here 3 years ago. I was supposed to be somewhere 3 years ago, supposed to be somewhere 2 years ago, 4 years. You supposed to be somewhere a certain amount of years ago. But while you said you wanted to be at a certain space in your life a couple of years ago, what came up at the same exact time? You had a chance for school. You had a chance to go study something. You had a chance for an internship. Somebody came into your life and was like, hey, come sit with me and come, hey, yo, I go to this over here. It's a free event where they go speak and talk about our emotions and shit to go deal with some emotional healing. Hey, I'm going to this motherfuckers came into your space and gave you exactly what you needed to assess your standard. But you were looking like, I ain't got time for that. You kept looking for the incentive. Well, you kept looking at it to fit your old incentive complex. Ooh, I wanted to, if I do this, will I get this? And if I do this, will I get this? You concentrating on the result. You concentrating on the result. And you got half or a fraction of what you wanted. But then you realize because you got it based on hope. So since you got it based on hope, it was based on quantity and not quality. So when it came time to take it to the next level, since you were not built for that next level because you didn't assess your standard, guess what happened? It fell apart. And it fit your pattern. The only thing that you went back to, it fit your pattern. That's why I don't do this. That's why I don't give this. That's why I don't do this. You went right back into your don'ts. You went right back into your pattern. You went right back into the graveyard. You went right back into the graveyard to dig another shallow fucking grave. You went right back into the graveyard to go look at what you left back over there. Because you looking at your past, you looking at the past aspect. Everything that I did worked over here. Yeah. But what did you learn? Yeah. You sitting there, ooh, so you mean I'm be able to, if I meditate and will I be able to float and teleport? So now you sitting there meditating with your eyes wide open, trying to see how far you got off the ground. Because you have no trust in yourself. You have no trust inside of your own darkness. You are not dealing with that shadow. So that shadow, that spirit, that insecurity, that brings doubt to keep your eyes open to see if you're doing it. Instead of you trusting yourself and closing your eyes and going for the fall. Man, it's going to hurt if I fall because I can't see where I'm going. It's going to hurt regardless. It's going to hurt regardless. If you take the fall or not, it's going to hurt regardless. Hell, if you cut yourself and you don't see yourself cut yourself, does it hurt? Remember when you were little? Remember when you were little and you scraped the hell out of your knee? And you were sitting there and you were like, you didn't know, you went on playing until someone pointed at your knee and said it was scraped. You didn't even notice it until someone said something about it, until you looked down at it. Or until the breeze hit it. Or until something burned it. You didn't even notice it, but you kept going. See, you lost that innocence. You lost that spirit of your innocence. And you've been fighting to find that in every space and time ever since. You've lost your spirit of your innocence. It has been locked. It's been locked deep down. Because your spirit of your innocence, that's your Lucifer. That's your falling angel. That's your morning star. That's your Baphomet. Sitting down there locked up in the rings. The rings of your insecurity, your doubt, your jealousy, your guilt, stuck down there in the gates. And you ain't went past the first point yet. Because every time you get to a point and you get excited because you get something, so you forget to keep doing what you did to get it, because you were thinking based on hope, the incentive, you stop doing it. Then you think, ooh, I'm in balance. Now I got to get back in balance. Now I got to get back in consistency. You're already in consistency. You're already in balance. You don't become balanced. You assess what's on the scales. You don't become consistent. You assess the degree of consistency that's inside of your life. You don't become love. You assess what you thought was love or what you rationalized as love, and then take the lessons to the standard of what you do for the love. You ain't becoming anything. You're already it. It's time to consecrate your energy. It's time to put the concentration in understanding am I transmitting or if I'm transmuting. It's time to do the work. All you got left is the work. If you have not realized conscious community, everybody's in a state of a recession of some sort in some way. And you have one or two choices. Now, at this point, the shadow is too dense for you not to work with it. That's what they meant. That's what everybody meant that told you, ooh, the veil is lifted. The veil is no more. That means the shadow is in full perspective. You are in full perspective mode. The shadow is now present. You ain't walking around it. You ain't walking around it. You ain't jumping over it. You can't do the old things anymore. You ain't pouring the same old libations to your fucking, you got to face it directly. Shit hurting your feelings up and down in your life directly. But you have a choice. You have a choice. You have a choice. I remember understanding my choice. I remember understanding that choice, and it was the most, for my calling and my potential, it was some of the most deeply rooted scarring and tearing. That was probably one of the last aspects of me going into the full aspects of my last death for my shamanic rites, to my rites of passage. Making decisions that were based on releasing me from the bounds of the wound so I can actually see the last aspects of myself fall onto the ground, and watching them fall onto the ground and watching these pieces fall to come into that aspect of where I'm at now, to change yourself. You're not going back to anything based on before. The thing about you healing and you becoming integrated with your shadow is you're not looking to be what you were before. It's time to embrace that. You got that choice. Whether it's consultations, hitting up with that big boy consultation, or resonates with you want to get that reading. Or any of my other services, human design, natal charts, or any of my other services that I do not promote because they all have custom prices. Hit me up in the inbox or in the DM. Let's get that conversation started, because I'm here to let you know that it's Papa Lucifer Samdi as that guidance. I'm letting you know now healing is destructive. I'm letting you know now that it's going to take a level of honesty that is going to challenge you based on every bias and every hurt that you want to keep living in, and to help you understand that you are deserving of being great, you are deserving of being awesome, you are deserving of being the motherfucking best, but you are not entitled to it without that work. You have the choice. You gonna put in the work or not? I desire you to be the fucking best. You can come to the graveyard. You can come to the crossroads. I stand at the top and I'm looking at you like, okay, what's your response? I don't answer what's, I don't answer how's, I don't answer when's. I don't provide answers to what's, when's, and how's. I answer questions to your why. That's what a guide does. That's as a guide, as a count, as a shot. That's what we do. We give you the why. We give you the perspective of your why. I can care less about what, when, who, and because all of that I'm automatically gonna go back to the shadow, which is your why. Be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. Asha.